Hello, welcome to Simple English Listening, bringing you interesting, meaningful conversations, but in simpler English. Today, we're joined by one of my very best friends, and we'll have an interesting chat about his spiritual and his religious journey and self-discovery. Remember, the quickest way to learn English is to listen to as much English as possible, which is just that one level above your level, so you understand about 90% or more of the language. Also topics that are enjoyable and interesting for you. This podcast is maybe upper intermediate level, but try to follow along if you can. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Stitcher if you enjoy these podcasts, so the algorithm sends it to more people. Also, leave a comment if possible. Today, we're joined by one of my oldest friends, James. Hello, James.
Hello, Tristan.
Lovely to see you again.
A pleasure.
Indeed. We've known each other since university, a long time ago. James is also an English teacher.
Yes, that's true.
We did the same course together. I moved to Vietnam and he was going to join me. But then where did you move in the end?
Well, in the end, I moved to the south of Italy for love.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I took him on holiday to Italy maybe 7-8 years ago.
No, more, I think.
Okay, yeah. And you met the sister, one of my friends here, and then you guys just kept in contact.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes you'd fly over from like the UK on the odd weekend. And yeah, so he gave me, when he was going to join me in Vietnam, he gave me a phone call and he was like, sorry, Tristan, but I have to follow my heart. And I was sad, you know. I was like, no, James, you must come to Vietnam and join me. But no, he decided to go to Italy, and now you've been here for 6 years.
6 years, yeah, 6 years.
Yeah.
I moved in 2015.
So I asked him if he'd like to do a podcast with me. I said, any topic you like. And he decided to speak about religion and his spiritual development, because it's quite new for you.
Yes, very new. Maybe about a year, maybe a bit more. So
I said, okay, your wish is my command. Let's speak about it. So we'll have an open-minded discussion about that. I know religion is very important for many of you listeners, so it might be a topic you can relate to in some way. So what inspired the change?
Well, I've always been interested in religion.
So I think maybe you've been romanced by Italy, you know, and the Catholicism here, and you saw the Pope a couple of times.
Yes, that's true.
Did you burst into tears and start speaking, you know, in tongues? And because it's very emotional to see the Pope, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen the Pope on 3 separate occasions, and each of those occasions were remarkable. I myself did not have this overwhelming emotion, but many people who I was with did have these kind of like experiences, let's say. And it was a really eye-opening experience to have had.
And so what inspired the change to follow Christian teachings for you?
Well, I guess Jordan Peterson, who is a Canadian psychologist, really influenced me. He did an amazing series about Genesis in particular, from a very logical point of view. And this inspired me to look more into the teachings of Christianity and the stories attributed to Christianity. I've always been somewhat interested in these topics as well, but I would say Jordan Peterson really was kind of the spark which lit the fuse to my change of thought.
Yeah, so he looks at stories like Cain and Abel, yes, right? Noah's Ark, etc. And he explains the meaning, right, in these tales, like Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge.
Absolutely, right? Yes.
How would you explain that from what you've or any story.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you're looking at stories in particular from Genesis or the older stories from the Old Testament, they are kind of compressions of stories which have been told generation after generation. And so you get a kind of compressed version of events. If you're looking at things like Adam and Eve, for example, with Eve giving the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to Adam, you may think to yourself, well, that sounds like a ridiculous story. But if you take it from a scientific point of view, human eyesight is absolutely incredible when it comes to distinguishing colour. And one of the reasons for this is to look for predators, snakes being one such predator, which would be venomous and kill our early ancestors. And so through the process of evolution, we've developed a keen eye for distinguishing camouflage of particular predators like this. And also a byproduct of that has been to identify ripe fruit or fruit which is good for consumption. So when you say that the snake or the serpent gave Eve the fruit, there is an element of truth to that. And then the idea of Eve giving this fruit to Adam, well, how do you keep a man close to you to protect your children, to protect yourself? Well, you give them comfort, you give them a place of stability, you offer them food, you offer them fruit. And so this is a small example of how a story which on the face of it maybe seems ridiculous or far-fetched, but can in fact have an awful amount of truth attributed to it.
Yeah, so that's one teaching from that story.
Absolutely.
But I guess that story presents many different there's many different ways that you can take in lessons from it.
Absolutely. And also the depth is incredible. The amount of scope to these particular stories is almost bottomless. I mean, that is one way of explaining it, but there are so many other ways of explaining these kind of stories that is beyond my knowledge.
The apple represents knowledge. So for me, I've always wondered why God is saying, don't chase knowledge, basically. Don't bite the fruit. I feel like for human progress, we should bite the fruit, we should chase knowledge.
Well, in some traditions, and this is not in the Bible, admittedly, it is seen as a kind of test. That God would allow Adam and Eve to eat from this tree of knowledge, let us say, but he needed to have some type of test to make sure that we were spiritually mature enough for this. But then again, that is a cosmic story opposed to the story I was explaining earlier, which is more based on scientific elements.
And I love Apple's logo. Apple's logo is an apple with one bite in it.
Yes.
But I only realized that it referred to like the tree of knowledge only like last year. Okay. I was like, oh, there's a bite mark in it. And as well, the apple, of course, represents discovery. But Isaac Newton, the apple lands on his head.
Yes.
In fact, we were in Lincolnshire with my family about 3 weeks ago in the countryside in England. It was from the same town Isaac Newton's from.
Oh, wow, okay.
And there's the same house with the same tree where the apple fell on his head. Still there today.
And as an amazing example of, one person would say coincidence about how apples and fruit have been within the human mind when it comes to the acquiring of knowledge or scientific elements. Or you could say that it is an element of the proof of God's continuing plan on earth. Using these coincidences to point into the direction of this.
So you appreciated these stories, but then at some point you decided that to believe in Jesus, right?
Yes.
And his lessons. So Jesus is a spiritual teacher. I mean, there's been many spiritual teachers, right? The Buddha, Ramana Maharshi, the great Advaita Vedanta teacher, and also philosophers, Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Lao Tzu, like the Taoist teacher, which is like an ancient Chinese philosophy to lead a peaceful and good life. So why Jesus? Tell us about.
Yeah, that is an understandable question, most definitely. I would say there are probably two key reasons. Firstly, we knew Jesus was coming. The amount of prophecies which were fulfilled by Jesus are staggering. There's at least 40 to my knowledge, and probably more.
And these are said in the Old Testament?
Absolutely, yeah. These are referred to in the Old Testament.
So the Old Testament is the part of the Bible written before Jesus' time? Yep, continue. So there's 40 prophecies in that.
Yes, and so we knew that someone like Jesus, the Messiah, was going to come to earth, which I think is a reason to at least listen to Jesus. Not necessarily to say that what he is saying is true, but just to give him the time of day. Okay, it was announced you were coming, you fulfilled these prophecies, you are here, well then what do you have to say? And then his miracles and the way he was able to influence the world in such a huge way, and how he was able not only to come back from the dead, but to defeat death itself, is something which is far beyond any other spiritual teacher or leader which I know of. So these two combined really give a platform to Jesus no other leader or teacher necessarily has.
Okay, that's interesting. So you said at least 40 prophecies predicted he would come.
Yes.
Could you tell us an example of that?
Well, absolutely. I think one of an example I find very interesting is that when the Messiah was to come to earth, he would be killed on a tree. And without
Messiah is the word for a savior, right? Messiah,
yes.
Like a spiritual leader. Okay, sorry, continue.
That's okay. And he would be, he'd be tied to a tree, and then he would be killed without a bone being broken. And you can say that maybe the cross is a symbolic tree, let us say, and Christ was not killed via any bone in his body being broken. And the reason this is interesting is because the time the prophecy was written, people were not crucified. It was not a practice. People were stoned to death, and so stones would inevitably break their bones. And so the concept of someone being killed in this manner without a bone being broken was an alien concept, let's say. But Christ fulfilled this particular prophecy, and there are many others, as I mentioned before.
Okay. Do you believe in the resurrection?
Do I believe in the resurrection? Well, this is this is an incredible question, because it is not so.
Or is it like a metaphor? So
Well, no, I don't believe it is a metaphor. I do believe that Jesus came back to life. But it's not so much a question of belief. It is almost more for me a question of trust. Do you trust what was said at that particular time? I would say yes. I think that we know so little about life. Mm-hmm. We know so little about consciousness. So who is to say that if you have an individual who leads a perfect life, or close to perfect as possible, and then they tell you that they are the Son of God, who is to say that an individual would not be able to resurrect themselves? Another contributing factor, which is, for me, an incredibly large part, is what happened afterwards. Because imagine you are part of this circle of friends, and your spiritual leader is not just killed, but crucified. We kind of forget how incredibly traumatic crucifixion actually is, because we have no reference point almost. We disregard how incredibly brutal it is. So your God has been crucified, and then what you think, well, I would think if I was in that situation, well, the story finishes here. How can anyone recover, let's say, from that type of position? And then you have the resurrection of Christ. And then you have an individual like St. Peter, who denied Christ 3 times, going from that point of view where he was like, no, I have nothing to do with this man, to being willing to be crucified upside down for his beliefs. And the people at that period, the disciples, an incredible experience must have happened to them. I don't think you can have any question about that, because it needs something that type of magnitude to start that kind of movement after the leader's demise, let's say. And so I would probably believe in the resurrection. Yes.
Yeah. So that is the one part which defies today's scientific understanding. So there's an element of what can be seen today as magic, essentially.
Well, yes. I mean, many of Jesus's miracles you could attribute to some type of magic. And there are two in particular. One is, of course, the resurrection, which is mentioned by all four Gospels, and also the feeding of the multitudes, when he feeds bread and fish to the numbers change. I believe he did it a number of times, twice, I believe. But the numbers of people change. But it's a large number of people with a limited amount of food. And so, again, both of those miracles, let's say, are documented in all four Gospels. So the feeding of the multitude must have happened in some sense as well, because why would they go to so much effort to include that particular point?
Yeah, but it could be, I don't know, like a metaphor or some kind of illusion or collective illusion, you know.
Well, of course.
Because maybe the mind has the power to do that. The powers of the mind we still don't fully know, right? And there are collective illusions that happen sometimes.
Absolutely, there are collective illusions which happen, and there is more to the story than simply the feeding of the 5,000 or whatever story. Another interesting point to take from that particular story is that the disciples gave out the food. So Jesus himself it wasn't as if he was giving out loaves of bread. The disciples did the actual work, let's say, but he gave them the power to do so. And you are right that there are definitely instances of mass hysteria, or instances where people believe they have seen something where they have not. But again, it is, where do you draw that particular line? Where do you draw the line from, this is a few people who saw a UFO and so there are aliens, to thousands and thousands and thousands of people experiencing the same thing at the same time?
So you learned about Christianity here whilst living in Italy. So for our listeners, the Christianity here is different than in the UK. In the UK, people are mostly Protestant. And in Italy, as well as Ireland and most of southwestern Europe, people are Catholic, right?
Yes.
So do you describe yourself as one of these two, or just...
Well, this is a surprising question. I would not describe myself as either of those, or any particular church of Christianity. I'm inspired quite a lot by Eastern Orthodox Christianity. So that is like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. I think there are lots of really valuable lessons within that form. And it is probably the oldest form of Christianity as well.
Yeah.
But I would not describe myself as Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox.
I remember when we were in Athens, we traveled around Greece together. We were in Athens and we walked into a church, and there's an Orthodox. We're just there to just see what's happening. There's some sights and sounds and people, a crowd of people in there. So we went to have a look, and there was a picture of Jesus as a Middle Eastern looking man.
So more olive skinned, let's say.
Yeah, like darker features. And I thought that was really cool, because that's, of course, like in a churches in America, he's blonde with blue eyes.
But this is another wonderful point. I mean, you can have like cowboy Jesus.
Yeah.
And it sounds bizarre, but you can have Jesus riding a Harley Davidson, because it is it's a symbolic thing. If you look at the works of Jesus, you can see many different elements of his character which can be formed into different images. You mentioned before about Jesus being a teacher. Well, this is absolutely true. You could also potentially see Jesus as some form of miracle worker or medicine man as well. So there are different... Jesus Christ as a personality is
Okay. I remember seeing a picture in Korea of Korean Jesus, and it's like a Korean man, like dressed in white robes. So it's as if like cultures around the world like mold him to fit their culture, I guess, to make it more accessible.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's it, because you try to see yourself in Christ, you know, and so that is, at least for me, that is definitely not any type of like blasphemy or anything which is necessarily negating the Christian message at all.
So he was resurrected when he was about 30. Was that right?
33. Yeah.
33. And people don't know what he did before, like in his adult life, right? Didn't he kind of disappear or something? Like, it's mysterious. And there's also a theory that he traveled around. I saw this documentary on BBC, like he went to the north of India, so they say. And then he didn't die on the cross. Rather, he was taken down and he survived the crucifixion and then went back to the north of India, to Kashmir. And they have a known saint over there called like Jesus or whatever, which is Jesus. And they found a tomb underneath the church, and there's coffins. So there's the boxes of the dead bodies of teachers of this area of India. And one of them, the coffin is pointing in the way that Jews have is that right? They have the coffins pointed in a different way?
I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. Do you know any theories of what he did before he became famous, I guess, as a teacher? Before
he became famous? Well, no. Yeah. I mean, like we have an understanding about when he was up to about 12 years old. And then after that, there is no particular record. If you look at I think there's two Gospels, in fact. I think it's only two which mention the Christmas story. And so that part of his life is not particularly well recorded. I mean, his birth, as it's only in two Gospels. A lot of that is just tradition, which is built around his birth. Probably my favourite book is Mark, and Mark starts with him being baptised by John the Baptist when he is an adult.
Okay, so he was baptised. Baptism, which is so when people become like officially Christian, they have to have their head put underwater for a brief moment, right? But that happened before Jesus then. Was it John the Baptist started doing that to people?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know the origins of baptism. All I know is that when he was baptized by John the Baptist, who is an important important figure within the story, reportedly there was literally a voice which said, "This is my son and I find him pleasing," or words to that effect. And so it was John the Baptist who singled out Jesus as the Messiah, as the Son of God, at least I should say. Yes.
Yeah. And John the Baptist, was he was the one that doubted? Did he doubt Jesus was a Christian for a long time?
No.
Okay. So what's the story quickly of John the Baptist?
John the Baptist was a bit of a wild man.
Yeah.
So he lived in the wilderness and would baptize people and would himself have his own kind of disciples, and his promise was to reveal the Messiah.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, within the Christian narrative, Mary, the mother of Jesus, knew Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. And so they have this connection here between John the Baptist and Jesus, not only through idea, but also through blood.
Okay. One thing I've noticed in the Catholic churches here in Italy, compared to churches in England, there's more of like gruesome and like bloody statues of Jesus, where it's more graphic, quite bloody. Jesus is in pain, lots of pain, and he looks sad, as if suffering. Whereas in England, you don't see this as much, I find.
No.
Yeah. Do you know anything about this kind of focus on, or just about the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism?
Well, if you're looking at so you have two different forms. You have the cross, which is empty, effectively, and then you have the crucifix, which has the body of Christ. The main difference is one, the empty one, you're focusing more on the resurrection, and the crucifix, you're focusing more on the sacrifice of Christ. They're both quite old symbols. I think the cross is an older symbol, to be honest with you. I think it's been used for a longer period. But the image of the crucifixion is very interesting because you're right. He is full of suffering. He is full of pain. And it's a strange one because it is almost to remind yourself of your own sin. Now, in the modern world, often, if you go to a psychiatrist, they will ask you to face your own issues, to face them head on, to confront what scares you. And the image of the crucifixion is to confront your own sin. Because effectively, the reason Jesus is on that cross is because of people like myself and because of people like you. That is the reason he is being crucified. Because even if you take away the fact of him being a Messiah, let's say he's just an incredibly good teacher, he was still put to death. For what reason?
Yeah. So you hear this idea, this phrase, and like growing up in the UK, when you're at school, when you're quite young, you grow up with the kind of Christian teachings, or just in the morning you sing a few songs, and they say this: "He died for our sins." And I've never, I don't fully understand what that means.
Okay.
But this relates to what you were saying a minute ago.
Yeah. I think you have to go backwards a little bit and focus on, well, what is sin? This is where, for me at least, the Eastern Orthodox is more interesting, because sin in the Catholic world is seen more as a kind of set of rules and you break those rules. Whereas within the Orthodox Church, it is almost about like, you miss your target, you miss your objective. You're not quite as good as you could be because of sin. So it is not to be punished, but it is to be redeemed, of course.
And it's to then excel in some way and to improve.
Absolutely, yes. So it's a
more positive spin on it.
Well, no, it's probably the more traditional spin. Because as I said before, the Orthodox Church is arguably older than Roman Catholic Church, at least. And so the idea of sin is not you made a mistake, you need to be punished. It is you made a mistake, redeem yourself. It's okay to correct that mistake. Sins are used as a way to try and focus yourself in the right way.
I see. So they're to steer you towards a more correct and righteous path in life.
Absolutely.
Rather than to feel punished.
Definitely. Within the sport of archery, when you miss the target, when you don't hit what you want to hit with an arrow, you sin. That is the term.
Wow.
And I think this is the way sin should be viewed, as missing the target, opposed to a law which you have broken.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome, actually. That's, quite inspiring. I don't know. It's more, I can relate to that more than the punishment.
Absolutely, yes.
So do you believe in heaven and hell or an afterlife? To get really deep here?
Well, again, I think it's the concept of heaven and hell which is the issue. I mean, do I believe people go and sit on fluffy white clouds? No. I think it goes back almost to the story of Genesis, where you have Eden, which is a kind of earthly paradise. With the second coming of Jesus, the whole world will be again united with God, effectively. That's the idea. That is, for me, heaven. That is paradise. And so when you die, because everyone definitely dies, you kind of have a point where nothing seems to happen. At least there's no evidence. People will say purgatory. People will say other things. I'm not too sure. Then you'll be resurrected. And then within that resurrection, you will be joined with God in unity. And hell is when you choose not to do that. When you choose against being joined in unity with God, then because of effectively the free will within the Christian idea, you are free to go to hell, and hell is a detachment from God.
Okay.
So I don't believe necessarily. So if you look at traditional heaven and hell, if you look at Dante's and Inferno and Purgatory, Paradiso, and if you look at Paradise Lost, you have like hell is full of fire and brimstone and demons.
Weird monsters, demons.
Precisely,
Yeah.
I don't buy into that necessarily. And also I don't buy into like hanging about on clouds and just, high-fiving angels and stuff. I believe that it is more complex than that. Of what I've studied, again, it's not as if it is ideas I have myself. These are things which I've taken inspiration from through my, year or so of research.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm making mistakes. I'm sure of it. I'm sure another person would say, "Oh, James, that is incorrect." And I'd be willing to accept that. But of my knowledge at this moment, what I'm saying I believe to be true.
And then there's other explanations for afterlife. For example, like the DMT, the chemical in your brain, becomes very active in that moment of dying. And people have they see things and they basically trip out, like they see like a intense illusion kind of thing. And also our brains are extremely like active in that last moment, but also our consciousness stays with us for it's something like 5 or 10 minutes for a small while after our last breath. So you're still so more scientific people can say it's basically kind of intense dreaming is an afterlife experience. And then some people get brought back and their heart starts again. But for me, like one thing, so like the idea of like a heaven with fluffy clouds and everything's perfect, and hell, because we live in a world of duality, there can't be light without dark. Good only exists because of evil. Excitement only exists because of boredom. Warm only exists because of cold. All of these things, all of our whole human experience is dualities. Everything exists as like two sides of the same coin, and the coin of like good or whatever or evil can't exist without the other side. So therefore, like a paradise, like in heaven, where everything's perfect all the time, that kind of perfection, it couldn't be perceived. So in paradise, which is an idea in many religions, how can everything be perfect all the time? Because in that place, perfection would not exist, because the opposite of perfection doesn't exist, unless it's like nothingness, and there are literally like zero events or happenings. Because even if you switched on a fan or stood up or spoke or any action, you're doing it to not be in another state or because something is missing, So the idea of like complete perfection,
yes, I understand.
It can't exist in our current how humans perceive things,
Absolutely. So if we're looking at the union of God and earth with the second coming of Christ, you're absolutely right. From our perception as humans today, it would be incredibly boring and it would not be good for us, I would say. But then that comes into the part of we also are resurrected. We are born again, let us say. And so
when you say we're also resurrected, you mean we physically die?
Yes.
The same as Jesus?
Yes.
And then in how we resurrected? What do you mean? We come back to life again?
Yes. But not as you or me. You are changed. You are different.
Okay.
And so you don't...
What, like a reincarnation, you mean? Like a different life cycle?
No, you're still yourself, but without the desires which would make that experience boring. No sexual desire, no hunger, none of these kind of bodily issues. At the moment, you have a body, and kind of your mind follows a little bit to a certain extent. After the resurrection, in theory, it should be the opposite of that. And so your body will be a different kind of body. It will not be you again. It will be you purified, if that makes sense.
But this is after the heart stops and the actual body dies.
Yes.
So we live again in this reality, in this universe.
Yes. Jesus comes back.
Jesus does. Yeah, I know. But
to earth.
Yeah.
And then all of mankind are resurrected,
Okay.
but not as humans, as a kind of different creature, let us say. But you'll still have your own consciousness, you'll still have your own soul, you just won't have the earthly desires. And if you choose against that, if you would prefer to enjoy those desires and enjoy to be detached, let's say, from the unity of God, then you're free to go to hell.
So I still don't understand. So resurrected, we die, the heart stops, the body stops.
Yes.
And then, like, I haven't met anyone on this plane of existence. You mean like we have another life, like essentially like a reincarnation?
It isn't this existence per se. It's not Earth as in Earth today. It is a Eden-esque Earth. It is a heavenly Earth.
Okay, so we go into a heavenly kind of new dimension or something.
Well, again,
I mean, we don't know. I mean, we're just kind of theorizing.
Yes, it's definitely a mystery, and I'm not saying for one moment I have any answers. But that's the concept, at least.
Yeah.
With people like Saint Augustine and can't remember his name, but another great theologian as well had similar ideas about this, because it is an incredibly important question. Because you are right. If there's nothing to do in heaven, how is that fun? And the answer is, well, you don't need fun. You don't need it. So it's almost like you're just a pure spiritual individual.
Yeah. Like it's a spirit, I guess, that's gone to, that's one with God.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And that is that unity with God is incredibly key here.
Yeah. So is it more important to go to this place, you must believe in God, or you must be a good person? Which is more important? Say if you don't believe in God, but you're like an amazing guy and you've helped millions and thousands of people in the world, but you don't believe in God in that way, does that person go to hell?
If they choose to.
So they have to take in God.
Yes, it's not a point system. It's not like you gain 10 points for doing this or you lose 10 points for doing that. It's not a case of, trying to be in competition with God. It is a case of you accept it or you do not accept it. And of course, your good actions are wonderful actions. And there are many amazing atheists who do incredible charity work, and they should continue doing those type of things. But if you don't let God into your life, then when it comes to the resurrection and what have you, you'll be given the option. I said it's an option thing. It really is. It's a choice to believe or not. And when I say believe, it is not like blind faith. It is a kind of trust. At least for myself. For myself, it's a kind of trust. Yeah.
Okay, so with belief in God, there's a kind of reward, and to not take in God, you're just not included in that reward, and maybe you go to who knows where. But if someone doesn't take in God, or someone does, is it their fault? Why should someone? So are people really in control of their decision making? Because, for example, there's many people who grow up, say, in tribal communities, in the jungle, in different religions and different upbringings, and they've just grown up with where there isn't God in their lives, and should they be punished for that? So we are our genes, our DNA, our upbringing, right? The question is someone fully in control if they're a believer or not a believer, good or evil? Buddhists and determinists would say no. So they think that everything exists dependent on everything else, and everything is a part of everything else and made from everything else. You're not one thing, you're a small part of millions of elements and influences that make you, your upbringing, your genes, every book you've read, and every experience you've ever had, every conversation you've ever had, And because these series of events started when you were a baby, you can't fully be in control of the path you've taken, and you can't fully be in control of who you've become. And your thoughts and actions and beliefs all come from your character, your personality, which has evolved from these things that you're ultimately not in control of. So some people are exposed to an idea of heaven and God, and some people just aren't, you know? So it's just like, you know, the way I've grown up, I could go to heaven, but you over there who hasn't heard of God, you have no chance because simply you don't even know about it, you know? Like, but yeah, the Buddhists, they think there's no just you, like nothing exists by itself, not you, like not your soul, nothing. Everything exists in their current form, dependent on everything else. They call it, in Buddhism, we call it emptiness. They say everything is emptiness of its own inherent personal form. So I guess my question is it really people's fundamental fault if they believe or not believe? Because every choice they make is based on how their genes, their upbringing, where they've come from, you know?
Okay, so going back to the point about natives, let's say, I don't like the term natives, but it's generic. These kind of individuals who have not been exposed to God would not necessarily go instantly to hell for not believing. No. When Jesus died, he went into, let's say, this hell space, in the tradition at least, and took away souls who were not exposed to him because they had died before his own lifetime. And so those kind of souls were saved. So if you don't encounter Jesus and you don't encounter the scriptures, then there is no automatic punishment. No, Christ already has dealt with that issue, let us say, in the biblical tradition. In terms of if it is a case of determinism or free will, I guess that is your question, yes?
Yeah.
There are strong arguments for both sides, absolutely. I would not say I am not a product of my society, because evidently I am. At the same time, people definitely do things which they feel they have control over and feel that they have the ability to do those things regardless of their particular circumstance. And so it's an interesting point that, do you have complete free will or do you have determinism? I mean, a lot of our modern stories, if you look at things like Harry Potter or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, there is an element of destiny within those stories. However, the main protagonist still needs to commit action to fulfill that destiny.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is every decision we make, it's in the frame of our thought processes, which is based on your past experiences, your genes. Like, we can't control how intelligent we are to a degree. You know, like, we're born with that. You know,
to an extent,
we can't control what family we're born into.
No.
And like, if you see one of two options, and if I see one of two options, you'll make a decision based on those past experiences and your relationship to those two choices. You know, so I guess that's my point, really.
And your point is totally valid. What my answer to that would be, you're missing kind of like the crucial element, which is you, which is your consciousness. It's not a case of only free will or only determinism. It is, for me, a kind of middle ground. Because I mentioned people like Luke Skywalker and Harry Potter, because all of our stories have this, I say all, a lot of our stories have this hero character. And this hero character has to typically overcome some kind of issue. And it is a choice. They make a particular choice. It is not as if it is, they make this choice because, or they make that choice because of another thing. It is the idea that you still have the ultimate decision. Now, of course, it is not as simple as yes or no, because I'm not saying it is yes or no. It is a grey area. But I don't think we can really say for certain one or the other.
Well, it's a very tricky question. I guess ultimately, is there free will? And I suppose that's unanswerable. But I would say, like, say you have two choices. One is to go down a black tunnel, and one's to go down a light tunnel. But maybe in your past experiences, you went down a black tunnel before and you found something amazing at the end of it. It was a great adventure. But for the other person, so you take that black tunnel, option.
Yes.
And some people, they might look at a black tunnel and it was terrifying. It was really scary. They encountered trouble. Someone tried to start a fight with them when they went down it, So then their decisions, their subconscious guides them towards a decision which kind of, where they've had the best past experiences in some way or form.
Yeah, but
or thoughts or memories.
But that's slightly different, I think. I think that is definitely going on your particular memory.
Yeah.
And for taking a shortcut, for example.
But also you could say choosing God and not choosing God. Some people might have seen some people choose God in the past, and they've seen effects that aren't so good, like to the people around them. Maybe, I mean, there is kinds of sects of, extremely religious sects sometimes that can treat the people around them unfairly, for example.
Yes.
And there's the opposite as well, where, so it depends on like how that person sees the God tunnel, the heaven tunnel and the hell tunnel, so to speak.
That again comes down to your choice. You have choice to do it. You have choice to reject God. God loves you so much that he is happy for you to reject him. You're not obliged to love God. It's not an obligation. You're not forced. Whereas if it is forced love, it is not true. And when I say love, I don't mean romantic love. I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, cool. That was a good bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mental conversation, to be fair. There's no answer. I mean, like I said, there's no answer.
Yeah, I mean, people have been talking about free will for as long as people have existed.
Exactly. And like that's why I mentioned about stories and stuff, because a lot of our stories have this kind of element of you choose a particular option, and it resonates with so many millions of people. There's probably some element of deep truth in there, but what it actually is, I don't know. I'm far too stupid for that.
So, do you pray or meditate, or I guess do any kind of spiritual practice related to Christianity? And tell us about how you have that in your life.
Okay, so daily I pray, and often I will follow the rosary. The rosary is just kind of it's a nice thing to give you contemplation about the life of Christ, and it is a kind of like relaxing, kind of therapeutic I guess, ritual to perform. I don't necessarily perform it, all the time, but I'll often listen to it, probably daily. And another prayer, which I will pray daily to myself, is the Lord's Prayer, which is the prayer which was given to the disciples via Jesus. And the Lord's Prayer is absolutely incredible in terms of its depth of meaning. Yeah. Very complicated.
Yeah. We used to have to say that at school.
With the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah.
Did you understand
Is that like, Our Father who art in heaven,
yes,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thine will be done as... What's the rest of it?
On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah.
And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
So that's a nice guideline, right? Like every day it kind of reminds you. And how does it like benefit your life, I guess, like your spiritual practices, like
again,
prayer and this.
It's a case of relaxation, I would say.
Yeah.
It relaxes me, and it gives me a particular type of focus.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you're focusing on God but
are you able to kind of forget about like the small trivial things that have annoyed you. Like it's kind of like it helps you rise above the noise and the chaos and the mess of being alive.
Well, absolutely, yes. I mean, again, to be honest, if we were to speak about the Lord's Prayer, we'd probably need another half an hour, and I don't believe your listeners would be prepared to listen to me speaking about the Lord's Prayer for hours on end. But it is, it's a very complicated and incredibly useful prayer. I recommend you say it every day. I'm sure you'd see a difference.
Yeah. Personally, like I meditate and do yoga every day. But actually, I would say it's weird to compare it because it's actually kind of different. My meditation is inspired by like Buddhism, Taoism, Advaita Vedanta, certain things I studied in India. In my meditation, first I focus on my breath, on the tip of my nose, where my breath comes in and out. And every time I think a thought, it doesn't matter what thought it is. For example, I have to wash the dishes. Does my friend still like me? What shall next week's podcast be? Like any thought, I return. I focus on my breath until I'm concentrating on just my breath, not distracted by smaller thoughts, I guess. So this thoughts kind of begin to lose their power over me, which is kind of liberating, helps me focus. And then I have like a loving kindness meditation. So may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you live with ease. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you live with ease. And may you be safe. And I repeat this, and in my mind, I go through people, usually starting with, say, like my enemies, or people I've had disagreements with. And I just really picture that person in my mind, and then I move on to the next person. And I kind of do that to like 5, 10, 15 people. And that puts me in a very like loving, space to start my day. And then I allow like all senses, my thoughts, feelings, sounds, sights, all senses just come and go through me and not get attached to any of them, including my thoughts. So I just sit back and watch things come and go. So I can maybe see like 2 birds, like hear the wind, a thought, but everything is just equally coming and going like through me. So I'm a space, and all of these, as I said, senses come and go. So for my personal development so far, I feel like that idea is a kind of spiritual enlightenment where you become kind of less attached to your, I guess, thinking mind, the ego, the construct that we've made. When thoughts come and go, so it becomes, as I said, like when the birds come and go, the wind, the thunder, everything's just another sensation, and it's freeing on the mind. And the ultimate effect, I find that like my thoughts become like less loud. So my thinking is like, it's like a radio that's been turned down. The volume has been turned down, and life becomes a bit lighter and more peaceful. And you're in a kind of a lovely position to be kind to people, because you're less likely to be offended, having to like prove yourself, having to win over people or fight for your values or beliefs, or this is wrong, that's wrong. I have to be the king of the mountain. I'm Tristan. I'm English. I'm a passionate teacher, blah, 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 blah. These thoughts, like the story we all tell ourselves of who we are, that's called the ego. The ego is the thoughts you have related to the person that you imagine you are. And the ego is basically a fiction, like a collective fiction, an idea of ourselves that you and society has essentially constructed. I like this, I don't like that. I like you because you believe in the same thing as me. I'm American, I'm a Republican, I'm a dentist. It's all man-made constructs. So the idea is that through meditation, you can just have a bit of space from these constructs, from, our thinking mind, In my experience, it takes us to a more natural and more peaceful state of mind to live from. So if we can like turn down our thoughts, like turning down the volume on the radio, we get kind of less distracted by basic, thoughts. So as I said, like, I'm going to show I'm a good worker. I'll show you that I'm this guy, that guy. Rather, the mind becomes freer to focus on the more creative, more worthwhile, more positive, more loving thoughts. Once our mind is more free, then we have more choice and less stress, because we can kind of control how much stress we let into our lives, because our stress comes from our thinking. Less fussing over things that don't really matter. Anyway, that's my summary of like spiritual enlightenment from a more Eastern Asian tradition, Buddhist, Taoist, Vedic, that comes with meditation. And but actually it's just a different state of mind, really. It's like a practice which helps your mind become more focused on the important things and be much more peaceful, and then when you try and do things that matter, you can do them better. So, and then there's the more fantastical idea of like spiritual enlightenment, that, fantastical idea, which is more like religious, like in Buddhism and like Hinduism. Like, once you achieve that state of mind completely, then you come off of samsara, you neutralize your karma, like the wheel of different lives, of different reincarnations, and your soul becomes one with the universe in a state of nirvana, which I guess is in some way similar to what you're saying about if you believe in God, your soul somehow joins him in some way.
Yes, it is similar.
Yeah, so that state of nirvana, but that's for more, I guess, you don't have to believe in that to be like a practicing Buddhist. That's more of like the extreme fans, so to speak, and that requires the extra level of like faith and more like the supernatural and the fantastical. It means that it's a belief in an idea that like can't be like proven by science or anything. As in, there's an element of faith to it.
Mm-hmm. Trust.
Yeah, like what do you think is the definition of like enlightenment or spiritual realization in the Christian tradition?
Okay, very good question. From the Catholic perspective, it would be to become a saint. If you're able to try your best to live in the light of God and to use God's power to help other people and to make the world around you better, then become a saint would be the goal of the Catholic Church. I would go even a step further, and I would go, again, going back to the Orthodox Church, I believe the pronunciation is thesis, which is effectively to become as close to Jesus as possible.
Yeah, another Christian friend of mine said that it's to become Christ-like.
Yes, that is for me the ultimate aim as well.
Yeah,
to become as close to Christ as you possibly can. You will not.
Yeah,
and that is because we are all full of sin. We're all full of mistakes. We're all full of slight misses. And so, but that would be the ultimate objective, to try and achieve some type of, to put it in a catchphrase, like a Christ consciousness.
But is it not, we live once, as far as we know, definitely in this body, in this incarnation, like is it not quite like brave and beautiful, to not try to be impersonating someone else, but rather have completely your own adventure, make your own rules and find your own perfection and spiritual realization.
Well, this is fantastic, the point you've just made here. And you're right, it is incredibly attractive. It's also effectively, worshipping Satan. That is a form of Satanism is precisely that. I'm in complete control of my world. I make my own rules. I do whatever I want. I don't need a framework. I am God. That effectively is a form of Satanism.
Well, you're not saying you're God. You're just saying I'm a person who just wants to...
Who has complete control over everything and writes the rules to everything.
Well, no, but doesn't have control to anything, you know? Well, it's not necessarily saying that you want to be in control completely and you can control your environment and all of these, you know? You're just saying, I want to find my own spiritual excellence.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how would you do that?
By trying different, well, by living as well as you can, you know, by being good to people, trying your best to be a good character, to give as much as you can, and to help the suffering of other people in any way you can, to try and make the world a better place. So by the time you die, I mean, just quite simply that by the time you die, the world can be a little bit better because you were here.
And I agree with that.
And then you have your own way of achieving that.
Oh yeah, but then what you've just given there are examples of to be Christ-like. So you are in a way imitating somebody else, just not knowingly. So with ignorance.
So then, but the Christ-like, that's one way to do it, you know, but you can still create a better world not doing it that way. Like Christ is one archetype, one type, one way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But say if you are inspired by other people, you know, there are surely other ways to create a better world than having to follow like the guidelines of Jesus or become like Jesus, because that's one personality, that's one character.
Well, as I mentioned before, Christ is all people to all men in a way, in the fact that you can take different characters and different elements of Christ's personality, and you can see your own reflected in that. And so it is almost the ultimate archetype. When speaking about other people, I agree with you. I think if you look at someone like the Buddha, I think he has incredibly valid points, and lots of them are truths. I think they are truths. However, it is not the complete truth. It is like 80% true. Or maybe another spiritual leader, again, who has wonderful ideas and thought process, maybe it's, 60% true. Whereas if you imitate Christ, at least in my belief, it is the truth. You're following the truth, the light. Because in a way, we're all meant to become in a very...
But is there a kind of arrogance though to that, to say like that Jesus is true 100% and others aren't? Like that's, well, it can't be proven. Is it just that comes down to faith, right? Well, yeah, that's just what you choose to believe.
Well, that's why we mentioned before when we were comparing Jesus to people like Martin Luther King or other spiritual leaders. Why listen to Jesus opposed to those other leaders? And I think I answered the question relatively well previously. What I was going to say is that within every single individual, there is the small light of God, effectively. And as a Christian, it is your responsibility to let that light shine on everyone and everything, whether it's people you like, people you don't like. God lets it rain on the just and the unjust. And desert people, traditionally speaking, in the Levant region, they want rain, and God provides sustenance to good people and to bad people. And that should be us as well. We should shine our God-esque light upon everybody, regardless of who they are.
But then some people have a different idea of what God's light is, Anyway, so I found this on a Quora chat room.
Okay.
Well, to be honest, I didn't. I just made it up.
So it's your question. It's another question of yours.
Well, I don't want my fans to think I'm religious or not religious, especially.
Absolutely, no, of course, no.
So that's why I try and do it as kind of objectively as possible.
Yeah, of course. Speaking about Buddhism for 10 minutes, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're not Buddhist.
Well, I'm not. This is one inspiration.
Absolutely. Well, as I said before, it's sort of like I'm attributed to any particular kind of church.
Yeah.
I'm Christian and, not Catholic, not Protestant. There are values in all. Sorry, what's your question? Yeah, it's definitely more of a C1 podcast.
Yeah, it's probably upper.
Yeah, advanced. Yeah, upper intermediate, advanced, definitely.
So, amongst many religious people, is there an idea that if they do good to other people, improve the lives of others, it's done as a way of self-benefit because they get rewarded in the afterlife or in heaven, So some people might do good to others, improve their lives, like give themselves to improve other people's lives, and for that reason alone, to give their love to help other people reach like a higher level of excellence, enlightenment, and it's nothing to do with if they get benefit from it,
Yes.
But then that there's some people that are good, so they benefit from it, like they get rewarded.
No, definitely. I understand what you're trying to say. In the fact that there are some people who pretend to be good Christians, let's say. Absolutely. Totally. Only because you go to church every Sunday does not make you a good Christian, does not give you the right to judge other people. And even if you do good actions, if you're doing those good actions because you, again, want to earn points to go to heaven, that is not the Christian way of thought. It needs to come from a sense of, like, when I mentioned love before, and I've used love a lot in this podcast, it is willing the best for the other. So it is to want the best for other people, regardless of who the other person is. If you're wanting the best for yourself, well, that is not God's love. Because God loves the world in that sense, in the sense that it doesn't benefit God. What benefit does it do to the creator of absolutely everything? To somebody, I say somebody, excuse me, but, to an idea as grand as God, humanity is insignificant. But he chooses through love, through wanting the best of others. So if you want the best for yourself, and that is a selfish action, I would say though there's merit to that, because it's better to do than not to do. But I don't see it as a way of, gaining.
So I guess so ultimately, I guess like God would know the reason why someone does an action.
Yes.
So it's the intent which matters more.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, and if it's for self-benefit, then it wouldn't be recognised in the more like godly.
Yeah, in the more cosmic manner, no, it wouldn't be recognised. When it comes to the judgment of Christ, it will be seen as those actions were self-serving. We're all guilty of self-serving actions constantly. As I said before, we're all sinners in that respect. And yes, I'm sure people find pride in helping people, in doing voluntary work, and maybe they don't even mean to. But again, that is because all of us are imperfect.
So, according to the Washington Post, I was wondering what you think of this. Like, the least religious countries in the world are the Netherlands, the UK, Australia, Israel, New Zealand, Scandinavia, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Canada, Austria, Hong Kong. They have the highest amount of agnostics and atheists, according to national surveys. These are also very wealthy countries with some of the highest standards of living and the most advanced economies, and also they're the most progressive politically in terms of women's rights, gay, lesbian rights, combating racism, as in trying to create a fair society, rule of law, protectors of human rights. So they try to be, generally, compared to many other places. So high employment, lots of opportunity, but they're also the least religious countries in the world. So with the largest populations of atheists. Do you think there's a link between their lack of religion, and their economic and political success?
Well, I would say all the countries...
As if religion can hold back progress in a society.
Well, I would say all of the countries you've mentioned are founded on Christian ideals. Maybe there's one or two you said maybe quickly I did not catch, but the vast majority are based on Christian ideals. All of Western thought is based on a Christian ideal. And so you could maybe make the argument that at this particular moment, there's a large population of atheists, and that's absolutely true to my understanding as well. However, the concepts and the ideals are rooted in Christianity. And also, I would say that, yes, they are very economically successful and politically sound. And that is for maybe two reasons. I would say, one, the influence of Christianity, but also the fact that those countries are quite stable. They're stable countries. And what has given those countries that stability? Well, following the rules of Christ, following the rules of Christianity, has been able to create a society which is stable enough to invest in. I would also say that maybe those countries you mentioned, I don't know if they're necessarily the happiest either. And so maybe there is a point of, yes, having lots of material wealth and believing that, again, not in Christ and not in needing to be saved, or I don't need to be saved because I live a good life, and being an atheist and having lots of riches, but still ultimately being unfulfilled and sad.
Well, fair enough. That's a good answer. So, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been really nice to hear how you've been inspired by this new belief system, and it helps you see light and love and positivity more so in life, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. As I said, that's the ultimate aim of Christians, is to pave the way for the Lord. And you do that by shining the light which is God given you to everyone, and to try to love everyone. As I said before, Christ gave two general rules. He was asked which of the 10 commandments were the most important. And he said, number one, love thy God, love God, and then love your neighbor as if yourself. And this is amazing, because we typically treat other people better than we treat ourselves. Our loved ones, we treat better than we treat ourselves. People will treat a cat better than they'll treat themselves. What I mean is, if you have a pet and you give them, they go to the vet and they need medicine, you'll make sure that cat takes all the medicine. For a human, for yourself, you would maybe only take half the medicine. So people are better at looking after people they're in care of, or they care about, than actually themselves.
So it's not just saying look after the people around you, but look after yourself as well.
Look after yourself and other people around you.
I've never thought that. That's like a...
But it is absolutely,
it's a good one.
Yeah, to love thy neighbour as if yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, James. And see you guys next time.